Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to HK Cheating Stories. We appreciate each and every one of you joining us. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's get the story started.
My name is Lisa, and I was never meant to win. My entire life, I was treated like a mistake, overshadowed, ignored, and sacrificed for my perfect, golden child sister, Jessica. But on the day she tried to steal my wedding, I finally got my revenge. And trust me, it was glorious. I've always known my place in my family. From the moment I was old enough to understand favoritism, I realized I wasn't the star of the show. Jessica was. My older sister, the golden child. The miracle baby my parents spent years trying to conceive. And me? I was just an accident, a mistake, a burden they had to bear. It wasn't just subtle favoritism. No, my parents made sure I knew every single day that Jessica came first. If she wanted something, she got it. If I wanted something, well, only if it didn't inconvenience her. My birthdays? A joke. The cake was always Jessica's favorite, never mine. Chocolate with raspberry filling. I hated raspberry, and they knew it. But every year, my mother would plaster on a fake smile and say, "Oh, sweetheart, I forgot you don't like this. But your sister does." I should have fought back more. I should have spoken up. But what was the point? Every time I did, I was either ignored or punished. If Jessica accused me of something, no matter how ridiculous, I was guilty. If I accused her, even with undeniable proof, I was lying, exaggerating, or trying to get her in trouble. And she knew it. At first, Jessica mostly ignored me. I was just her shadow, the little sister she barely acknowledged. But as we got older, something changed. She lost her friends. Maybe they moved away, maybe they got tired of her entitled attitude, I don't know. But suddenly, my presence became a problem. I was popular at school. Not a queen bee or anything, but I had friends. People liked me. And Jessica hated that. She started making up stories. Small things at first. Whispering to our parents that my friends were bad influences. That I was acting out. They believed her without question. Then she escalated. Accusations of stealing, lying, cheating. One by one, my freedoms disappeared. My parents grounded me, took away my phone, refused to let me go anywhere. "Why do you even need friends?" my mother asked one day. "Why can't you be like your sister and enjoy family time?" Because family time meant sitting in silence while they showered Jessica with praise and ignored me entirely. What saved me from complete isolation was my extended family. Most of them lived in the same town, and I got along well with my cousins. They noticed how I was treated, even if my parents thought they were fooling everyone. One day at a family gathering, a cousin invited me to hang out, and I had to tell them the truth. "I'm not allowed to have friends," I said, my voice hollow, "because Jessica doesn't have any." The look on their faces was priceless. Horror, shock, and worst of all, for my parents at least, anger. Word spread. The adults confronted my parents, demanding answers. My parents denied everything, of course. They called me a liar, an ungrateful little girl making up stories for attention. Then, when we got home, they grounded me for an entire month. But something changed after that. Maybe the confrontation embarrassed them. Maybe they realized they couldn't be as blatant about their favoritism. Either way, I got some leeway after that. Not much, but enough. Jessica, of course, couldn't stand it. She sulked, whined, demanded to change schools. And just like that, my parents paid extra to send her somewhere else, where she could be the queen bee again. But instead of forgetting about me, she became worse. Because now, she knew she had the power to make my life miserable. And she was going to use it. When Jessica transferred schools, I thought, naively, that maybe, just maybe, things would get better. That with her gone, I'd finally have some breathing room. Maybe my parents would stop holding me up to her impossible, spoiled standards. Maybe they'd even start seeing me as my own person. I was wrong. Jessica might not have been in the same school anymore, but her influence remained. She made sure of that. It started with the little things. My curfew, already strict, became ridiculous. My parents started questioning my every move. "Who are you hanging out with?" my mom would demand. Are you sure they're good people? Good people. According to whom? Jessica? At first, I didn't understand what was happening. Then one of my friends stopped talking to me. Then another. And another. It wasn't until one of them, a girl named Emily, pulled me aside one day that I got the full story. Your sister's been spreading rumors about you, she whispered, glancing around like she was afraid someone might hear. She told everyone you're fake, that you talk behind our backs, that you try to steal boyfriends. I felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath me. I barely even spoke to Jessica anymore. I had no idea who she talked to at her new school, how she got in contact with people at mine, or why she even cared. But she did. She cared enough to systematically destroy my social life, one friendship at a time. I confronted my parents. I told them everything. They didn't believe me. That doesn't sound like Jessica, my dad said with a frown. She's just looking out for you, my mom added. If she's warning people about your friends, maybe it's because she sees something you don't. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My friends were being driven away, my social life crumbling, and my own parents, the people who were supposed to protect me, were backing the person tearing it all down. And it didn't stop there. Jessica still came home on weekends, and whenever she did, my life became a fresh hell. She brought her new friends over, loud, obnoxious girls who looked at me like I was dirt under their shoes. They'd snicker, whisper, make little comments when I walked by. And if I dared say anything, if I so much as looked at them the wrong way, Jessica would run straight to our parents with tears in her eyes. She's being so rude to my friends, she'd sob. She's always been jealous of me, and now she's trying to ruin my life. My parents, of course, believed every word. You need to be nicer to your sister, my mother scolded me one night. She's trying to include you, and all you do is sulk. Include me? Jessica didn't want me included. She wanted me isolated. And she was winning. By the time I was 16, I had no real friends left. I stopped trying. There was no point. Every time I met someone new, Jessica found a way to chase them off. And my parents, whether through sheer stupidity or willful ignorance, helped her do it. The only people I had left were my cousins. My parents didn't dare treat them the way they treated me. They had to keep up appearances, after all. But even with my cousins as a small lifeline, my world felt suffocating. Then one day I met someone, my first boyfriend, and just like everything else in my life, Jessica found a way to ruin that too. When I met Alex, I finally felt like I had something of my own, something Jessica couldn't touch. He was kind, funny, and best of all, he didn't know my family well enough to fall for their lies. For the first time in years, I had someone in my corner. Someone who saw me for who I was and not the broken, bitter version my sister had spent years molding. I should have known it wouldn't last. My parents insisted on meeting him. I dreaded the idea, but Alex, ever the optimist, thought it would be fine. Maybe they'll like me, he said with a hopeful grin. I laughed bitterly. That's not the problem. Jessica's the problem. He didn't understand. Not yet. That night, my parents were unusually warm. My mother smiled too much. My father asked forced, uncomfortable questions. And Jessica? She barely spoke to Alex at all at first. It was later in the evening when it happened. I had stepped out to grab something from my room, leaving Alex alone in the living room. When I returned, I found him standing stiffly by the kitchen doorway, his face pale, his hands clenched into fists. What's wrong? I asked, my stomach already twisting into knots. He pulled me aside, his voice low. Your sister just tried to hit on me. I felt like the air had been knocked from my lungs. What? She sat next to me, he whispered, started leaning in close, touching my arm, telling me you weren't really a great girlfriend, that I'd be happier with someone more experienced. I wanted to vomit. Jessica, my sister, the girl who had spent years tearing me down, making sure I had no friends, no social life, no happiness. And now she was going after the one thing I had left. I stormed into the living room, ready to confront her. But before I could say a word, Jessica burst into tears. Alex made a pass at me, she wailed, running straight to my mother. I didn't know what to do. I tried to be nice, but he kept flirting with me. My mother gasped, eyes darting between us. My father's face twisted into disappointment. And then the inevitable. Lisa, my father said sternly, I don't think this boy is right for you. What? My voice cracked. You believe her? Jessica let out a soft, pitiful sniffle. I didn't want to say anything, she murmured. But I had to. I couldn't let him keep lying to you. I turned to Alex, who looked just as stunned as I felt. He opened his mouth to argue, but it was already over. My parents had made up their minds. Stay away from him, my mother warned. You have terrible judgment, Lisa. You always choose the wrong people. I was too numb to argue. That was the beginning of the end. Alex tried to fight for us, but my parents made it impossible. They restricted my curfew even more, refused to let me see him, and monitored my every move. I tried sneaking around, but it was hopeless. The relationship crumbled under the pressure. Jessica had won. Again. But she wasn't done. A year later, I met someone new. Daniel. He was different from Alex. More confident, more rebellious. When I told him about my family, he didn't back down. He thought it was ridiculous. Let them try something, he told me. I won't fall for their games. He underestimated Jessica. She pulled the same stunt. Flirted with him when I wasn't looking, whispered lies into my parents' ears. And once again, they believed her. Lisa, you keep picking the worst men, my father sighed. This is the second time, my mother scolded. Do you really think both of them would lie? I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab them by the shoulders and shake them until they saw the truth. But I knew better. It didn't matter what I said. Jessica always won. By the time I graduated high school, I had given up. I stopped dating, stopped trying. I let them believe whatever they wanted, because I was done fighting a battle I could never win. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that my greatest battle was still ahead of me, and this time I was going to win. By the time I was nearing graduation, I had already accepted one simple, undeniable truth. My parents would never invest in me the way they had in Jessica. I overheard them talking one night, voices low but sharp. She's going to expect us to pay for college, my mom whispered. We can't, my dad replied. We're already paying for Jessica's tuition. Lisa will have to work. They didn't know I was standing outside the door, listening. They didn't know that I had spent the last 4 years preparing for this exact moment. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of watching me beg. The next week, my mother sat me down at the kitchen table, her expression one of forced sympathy. Honey, she began, we need to talk about your future. I said nothing. She sighed, clearly expecting resistance. Jessica's college tuition is a big expense, and we just don't have the funds to pay for yours right now. But if you work for a few years, I cut her off with a smile. That's okay, Mom. I understand. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked confused, like she hadn't planned for this reaction. Well, she said slowly, if you decide to stay at home, you'll have to pay for your own expenses. Rent, utilities, food. We can't support you while you're not in school. I nodded. Of course. That's fair. Now she looked outright suspicious. I could see it in her eyes. She had expected me to argue, to cry, to throw a tantrum they could use as justification to never support me at all. I refused to give them that satisfaction. What they didn't know was that I had already secured a full scholarship. I had worked tirelessly, studied harder than I ever had, because I knew that my education would never be a priority to them. When the official acceptance letter arrived, I posted it on social media before even telling them. I knew they wouldn't dare reject me outright, not when the whole family could see. Oh, Lisa, that's unexpected, my mom said, feigning a smile when I showed her. That's great, my dad added stiffly. But their excitement was short-lived. Jessica wasn't doing well in college. The golden child, the one who was supposed to be smarter, better, more deserving, was struggling. Her grades were barely passing, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't the center of admiration. So my parents tried one last time to sabotage me. Are you sure you want to go? My mom asked a week before I left. I mean, Jessica's having a hard time, and she's so much more responsible than you. I laughed. Not loudly, not mockingly, but just enough to let her know that I saw right through her. Yes, Mom, I'm sure. And that was that. For the first time in my life, I was free. College was everything I had dreamed of. I didn't have to check over my shoulder for Jessica's manipulations. Didn't have to fight for validation that would never come. I was finally my own person. I still went home for the holidays. My parents made sure to remind me at every opportunity that Jessica was struggling, that she had to move back in, that she was working at the same company as my mother thanks to connections. She's been through so much, my father sighed during one visit. You should be more supportive of your sister. I just nodded and changed the subject. I wasn't stupid. Jessica resented me more than ever, and my parents, whether they admitted it or not, were watching the pedestal they built for her start to crumble. But I didn't care, because for the first time in my life I was winning, and soon they would all know what it felt like to lose. If there was one thing my parents had always believed, it was that I was incapable of making good decisions, especially when it came to men. They had spent years tearing apart my relationships, making sure Jessica was always the one in the spotlight, while I was the poor, naive girl with bad judgment. So when I met Ryan, I knew exactly what was coming. Ryan wasn't like the boys before him. He wasn't the type to roll over and let people walk all over him. He was sharp, confident, and had the kind of wit that could cut through someone like a knife. He saw through people immediately, and when I told him about my family, instead of pitying me, he grinned. They sound like a mess, he said. Can't wait to meet them. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. When we got engaged, my parents demanded to meet him. Not asked, demanded. I didn't want to. Ryan did. I want to see what kind of game they're going to play, he told me, eyes alight with something dangerously close to excitement. And then, we're going to play them right back. That was Ryan, always ready for a fight. So, reluctantly, I let him go. Alone. He came back later, grinning. Babe, he said, barely able to contain himself. Babe, you are not going to believe what they want. I stared at him, confused. He pulled out his phone, played a recording. Their voices filled the room. We're willing to pay for the wedding, my mother said carefully, as if offering a gift wrapped in razor wire. On one condition. Ryan's voice was calm, curious. And what's that? My father sighed. Jessica needs to walk down the aisle first. I felt the blood drain from my face. She's older, my mom continued. It's wrong for a younger sister to get married first. It's only fair if Jessica at least gets to experience walking down the aisle in a wedding dress. There will be photos, a cake, everything. Couldn't breathe. Ryan paused the recording, watching my face. Are you mad? I didn't answer. Couldn't. Jessica had spent my entire life taking everything from me. My friends, my relationships, my dignity. And now, when I had finally found something they couldn't control, she was going to try and steal that too? Ryan tilted his head, studying me. Then he grinned. Good. I was hoping you'd be pissed. Because I have a plan. I swallowed hard. What kind of plan? He leaned in, eyes glittering with mischief. We're going to make them think they've won. Ryan's grin was dangerous, the kind of grin that meant trouble. I was still reeling from what I had just heard. My parents' voices echoing in my head. Jessica should walk down the aisle first. She should wear a wedding dress. She should have her own cake. They wanted to turn my wedding into a rehearsal for hers. But Ryan, he was thrilled. We're going to let them think they're winning, he said. And then, at the last second, we're going to pull the rug right out from under them. I blinked. How? He leaned back, looking way too pleased with himself. Simple. We let them pay for the wedding. We let them think we're going along with it. And when the day comes, Jessica isn't getting anywhere near that aisle. I stared at him. You want to scam them out of their own money? He shrugged. Call it back pay for emotional damages. I won't lie, there was something satisfying about the idea. My parents had spent my entire life treating me like an afterthought, throwing every dollar they had at Jessica while leaving me with scraps. Now, they were about to fund the most extravagant wedding of the year. and not for the daughter they worshipped. So we set the plan in motion. Ryan went back to my parents and reluctantly told them that I wouldn't be happy about the arrangement, but he was willing to help them pull it off. He told them I was emotional, controlling, and had bad judgment. Their exact words thrown right back in their faces. They believed every word. And that's when we started draining them. We went venue hunting. When my parents asked about the menu, we picked the second lowest priced option, just to be safe. Then Ryan, oh so helpfully, took Jessica there for a tasting and sighed dramatically. "It's a shame," he told her. "Lisa wanted the premium menu, but we didn't want to take advantage of your parents." Jessica, of course, demanded that our parents pay for the best option. We pulled the same trick with the flowers, the photographer, the decorations. Every time we played them like a fiddle. The wedding was shaping up to be something huge, extravagant, and completely paid for. But the dress, that was a problem. My mother wanted me to wear something ugly. Not outright hideous, but plain. A dress that would make me fade into the background while Jessica had her moment in white. I couldn't just say no. That would be suspicious. So Ryan handled it. He went to their house one afternoon and pretended to go along with their idea. And then Jessica, because she could not help herself, suggested destroying the dress I actually wanted so I'd have no choice but to wear the one they picked. Ryan acted conflicted but eventually agreed. When he came home and told me what she said, I wasn't even surprised. "She's a cartoon villain at this point," I muttered. Ryan snorted. "Don't worry. We'll make sure her big moment never happens." To make the deception even more airtight, I refused to text my parents or Jessica about any wedding details. If they wanted to talk, it had to be in person, so there was no proof of anything. Meanwhile, Jessica kept trying to flirt with Ryan. He let her. Not because he liked it, but because he was playing his role. He'd hesitate just enough to make her think he was conflicted, stall just enough to keep her feeling powerful. He wanted her to believe she had the upper hand. By the time the wedding was only a few weeks away, everything was set. Jessica thought she was about to have her dream moment. My parents thought they had successfully manipulated us into giving Jessica what she wanted. And Ryan and I, we were about to ruin them. The morning of my wedding, I woke up with an eerie sense of calm. It was strange. After a lifetime of feeling powerless against my parents and Jessica, today was the first time I felt in control. I had spent weeks pretending to be clueless, pretending I didn't know what they were planning, pretending that I was nothing more than a naive, oblivious fool. Today, they would be the fools. Ryan and I had left nothing to chance. Jessica was supposed to arrive fashionably late, just as the bridal march started. My father, who was supposed to walk me down the aisle, would then conveniently step away at the last second to welcome his real priority, Jessica, in her stolen moment of glory. By the time I realized what had happened, they thought it would be too late. Except, they didn't know about the security guard. He was positioned outside the venue, ready and waiting. His instructions were simple. Do not let Jessica in. And to make it even better, we told him to pretend he had never even heard of her. So, while my bridesmaids and I got ready inside, the real chaos was happening outside. I didn't see it, but later, the stories poured in. Stories told with gasps, laughter, and pure disbelief. Jessica arrived in a full wedding dress. Not a simple white gown, not a cocktail dress, but a floor-length, lace-covered, dramatic wedding dress. She was ready for her moment. She walked up to the venue entrance, smiling, glowing, confident. And then security stopped her. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You must have the wrong venue," the guard said smoothly. "The wedding party is already inside. The bride arrived an hour ago." Jessica blinked. "I am the bride." The guard frowned, pretending to be confused. "Ma'am, I just let the bride in myself. If you're trying to crash the wedding, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." That's when my father arrived. "Let her in," he demanded. The guard didn't flinch. "Sir, I don't have anyone by that name on the guest list." My father lost it. "You don't understand. She's my daughter. She's not on the list," the guard repeated coolly. "If you'd like, I can call the police to clear this up." That was when my friend, who had been waiting for this exact moment, jumped in. "What's going on?" she asked loudly, drawing the attention of nearby guests. "Why is Jessica in a wedding dress?" People turned, heads swiveled, conversations hushed, and just like that, the secret was out. Inside, I was standing at the entrance, arm in arm with Ryan's father. The music had started. The doors had opened. My father should have been there, walking me down the aisle. Instead, he was outside, dealing with Jessica's meltdown. The moment I stepped inside, whispers rippled through the crowd. My dad's empty spot next to me made it clear something was wrong. I let my lips tremble, just slightly. I let my eyes shine, like I was on the verge of tears. A guest leaned forward, whispering, "Where's her father?" Another whispered back, "I heard he ran off at the last second." Someone else gasped. I swallowed hard, just enough to make my voice waver. He said it wasn't supposed to be me standing here. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. A murmur. A ripple of shock. People weren't just whispering now. They were talking. Jessica had spent years turning people against me, making me look like the bad guy. Now, everyone saw her for what she really was. Outside, she was screaming. Inside, I was walking down the aisle. Jessica never made it in. My parents never came back. And by the time Ryan and I were pronounced husband and wife, the only thing left of my family was their humiliation. I wish I could say my parents and Jessica came to their senses after the wedding disaster. That they apologized, that they realized how horribly they had treated me my entire life, that they finally understood what they had lost. But people like them, they don't change. Ryan and I spent the rest of the wedding celebrating. Even though I knew what was happening outside, the screaming, the crying, the sheer chaos, I refused to let it ruin my day, because for the first time in my life I had one. And it was beautiful. The whispers never stopped. Everywhere I turned, guests were murmuring in shock, replaying what had just happened. My father abandoning me at the last second, Jessica arriving in a wedding dress, the security guards turning her away. But no one came up to me with pity. If anything, people were nicer, more affectionate, more supportive than they had ever been before. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was just the sheer insanity of what had happened. Either way, I didn't care. I spent the reception laughing, dancing, soaking in every second of joy that Jessica had tried to steal from me. At one point, Ryan disappeared for a while. When he came back, his face was red, his jaw clenched. He didn't say anything at first, just took my hand and kissed my knuckles like he was grounding himself. "What happened?" I asked. He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. Then he leaned in and whispered, "Your sister threw herself on the ground, kicking, screaming, like a child." I blinked. "You're joking." "I wish I was," he muttered. "I had to leave before I lost it." I stared at him for a second before bursting out laughing. Jessica, the girl who had spent years treating me like I was beneath her, like I was some pathetic, jealous nobody, had a full-blown meltdown in the parking lot. It was perfect. The next day, the messages started. Missed calls, voicemails, then the texts. "Jessica, you ruined my life. Jessica, Ryan is a two-faced snake. He tricked us. I hope he cheats on you. Jessica, actually, he probably already is. With me." Ryan read that last one over my shoulder and let out a wheeze of laughter. "Oh, I love that one," he said. "I'm printing it out and framing it." Then, as if on cue, my parents started in. "Mom, Lisa, we need to talk. You have no idea what you've done to this family." "Dad, pick up the phone. Don't be childish." "Jessica, you think you're so smart, but you'll regret this. Everyone turns on you eventually." It was pathetic. Ryan took my phone, screenshot everything, and dropped it into our family group chat. Then he sent one final message. "Ryan, to our dear family, please help. Lisa is being harassed by her parents and sister after they failed to ruin our wedding. They won't stop calling and messaging her, even on our honeymoon. If anyone knows where they are, please keep it to yourselves. We'd hate for Jessica to try and accidentally show up at our hotel, claiming we agreed to pretend to sleep together. He even added a crying emoji. And then, for the first time in my life, my family took my side. Aunts, uncles, cousins. They all turned on my parents and Jessica, shaming them for their behavior, telling them to back off, calling them out for the absolute insanity of what they had done. And after that, silence. It was over. Ryan was a little disappointed. I was hoping she'd try something stupid again so I could roast her in public. I just smiled. Jessica and my parents had spent my entire life making sure I knew my place, making sure I never had anything for myself. And now, I had everything. A life away from them. A husband who would burn the world down for me. And best of all, Jessica humiliated. For once, I wasn't the one losing. For once, they were. And nothing had ever felt better. Looking back, I realized that the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about breaking free. My parents and Jessica thrived on control, on making me feel small, on convincing me that I needed their approval to be happy. But I don't. And neither do you. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: you don't owe toxic people a place in your life, even if they're family. Set boundaries, protect your peace, and never let anyone make you feel like you're less than you are. Because the moment you take control of your own life, you win.